Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Friends and Fiction. I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
I am Patti Callahan Henry.
I'm Kristin Harmel.
I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. On this week's episode, we are thrilled to welcome our October featured author, Paula Hawkins, to discuss her new novel, our Friends and Fiction pick of the month, The Blue Hour. The book is out October 29th, and we are so excited to speak to Paula about it.
But first, as we often do, we have just a quick reminder to check out all the fun things going on in our Friends and Fiction community at friendsandfiction.com. There you'll find our show schedule and links to our bookshop.org page, to the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, to our merch store, and to our newsletter sign-up. You will also find all the info on any live events we have coming up, including 2 that happen in just 2 weeks on November 6th and 7th in Orlando and Amelia Island, Florida. So in other words, if you want to know more about anything Friends and Fiction offers, and we offer a lot, be sure to check out friendsandfiction.com.
And I'm here to talk about our Substack. It is amazing. It is much more than a newsletter, and it is called Friends and Fiction Endless Stories. Here you can read all our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app. But if you subscribe, those posts just pop into your inbox, so you never miss a thing. And I need to tell you, it is so much more than an email newsletter. For paid subscribers, we offer this incredible extra content, including deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests, monthly roundtable discussions between the 4 of us and our author friends. For example, Kristy just did one with Ann Garvin, Allie Brady, and Viola Shipman about summer camp and why it is so appealing as a setting in a novel.
I bet Paula could put a really good book at a summer camp.
Yes. There you go. And we also just an hour ago did an awesome, it was so much fun.
It was.
So
We
fun.
did an Ask Me Anything with the 4 of us and with Meg. And paid subscribers got to hop on a Zoom with us and ask us anything they wanted in the green room before the show. And it was such a wide array of questions.
They're great questions.
It was great. Yeah. So it just felt like we were all at a party together.
Yeah.
So we'll be announcing another VIP Ask Me Anything Zoom very soon, featuring all 4 of us. Now, it's only to paid members. It costs just $5 a month or $50 a year for the paid subscription. But remember, you can always start free and upgrade. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com, or you can just go over to the website and go.
We love seeing all these nice comments from people who are there. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Guys, we have got a lot of fun things going on in the Friends and Fiction world. And so before we get to Paula, we're going to talk about a few of them. So MKA, I believe you have a new novella hitting next week.
Yeah, really, it's a short story. It's a long short story. My Amazon original, Holiday Hideaway, comes out in ebook and audiobook on Tuesday, October 29th. You can pre-order it now, and it will just show up on your devices on Tuesday.
Love it.
Now, it won't be available in print, only digitally as an ebook from Amazon and on audio from Amazon and Audible. And Meg will share the link in the comments. Kristin, how about you? I think you've got 2 new covers to show us, right?
I do, and I'm so excited about your short story / novella. I already have it ordered on.
I remember when we were all
audio.
brainstorming the title.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
And I
we
remember
did.
who came up with Holiday Hideaway, by the way.
Was it you?
I can't believe you came up with that, and I'm the queen of alliteration.
I know. I know.
Wow,
I'm
easy.
shocked.
I can't wait for that one, Mary Kay. It's going to be so good. Well, I recently revealed the title and cover for my 2025 book, The Stolen Life of Colette Marceau. That book will be out June 17th. Isn't that cover beautiful? I love it
Yes.
so much.
So beautiful.
You can pre-order it now. I will have lots more info, including giveaways, tour stops, etc. All the stuff you expect from us in the coming months. So stay tuned. We'll be sure to talk about it here. I'll be posting it on my social. Meanwhile, Simon & Schuster just this week released a repackaged edition of my 2016 novel, When We Meet Again. So I love this new look. It's completely different than the original cover. It has an updated author's note. It has updates to the text and a brand new cover, lots of new stuff. So I hope you like the new look too, and I hope you'll grab a copy. But Patti, I believe you also have some news.
Oh my gosh, poor Paula. Paula, I know you're sitting back there. We have
Coming
so
to
much
us from
news
London.
this week.
It's so
Don't leave
there.
us. We're almost there. I promise. So Simon & Schuster has just announced Atria, a great gift campaign for my March 2025 novel, The Story She Left Behind. The books will be on store on March 18th, but they have a gift if you pre-order it, and you'll be eligible for this gorgeous digital travel journal that shows all the amazing pictures and stories from my research trip to London and the Lake District. And you get these little custom designed book plates. You know how you lend a book to a friend and then it disappears? Yeah, now that won't happen. And so you can find all the information either in our comments that Meg is posting or on my website. Also, a Goodreads giveaway is going on right now with 100 advanced reader copies. So be sure to enter. You have 20 days for that. So Meg will share all the deets. And they're also on all my things, all my PCH things.
I mean, I'm kind of feeling like a slacker. I mean, I went to Taylor Swift. I did something.
I know.
Don't forget about our 2 live events coming up in Florida in just a couple weeks. Meet the 4 of us in person on Wednesday, November 6th in Orlando for Friends and Fiction Live, the cocktail party edition, which is kind of our favorite edition, I feel like.
Yep.
It's a fun party to raise funds for Florida cancer specialists. Tickets are still available, but going fast. And the deadline to purchase them is Halloween, October 31st, just a week away. So be sure to get yours now. The next day, on Thursday, November 7th, we will all be together again in Amelia Island for a super fabulous brunch event at the Ritz-Carlton to benefit the Amelia Island Book Festival. And bonus, our good friend Tim Ehrenberg of Tim Talk Books and Nantucket Book Partners will be there as our MC. Think this one might be sold out, but give it a shot. Get on the wait list. Meg will share links to both events in the comments.
Whew.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Wow, finally.
For Paula. Yes.
Yes, finally. It's time. Let's welcome our friend, Paula Hawkins. Paula worked as a journalist for 15 years before writing her first novel. Born and raised in Zimbabwe, she moved to London in 1989 and now splits her time between there and Edinburgh.
Her first thriller, The Girl on the Train, became a global phenomenon, spending an astounding 80+ weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, including 20 weeks at #1. It went on to sell more than 23 million copies. Published in 50+ languages, The Girl on the Train was a #1 bestseller around the world and became a box office hit film starring Emily Blunt.
I mean, same, y'all, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
same. I want to be like, you might have heard of this book.
You might have, yes. So Paula's most recent thrillers, Into the Water and A Slow Fire Burning, were also instant #1 bestsellers. In 2021, A Slow Fire Burning was nominated for Thriller of the Year at the British Book Awards.
Paula's masterful, page-turning, and unsettling new thriller. Unsettling's an understatement. New thriller, The Blue Hour, will be published on October 29th, just in time for spooky Halloween. And best-selling author Lee Child has called it the best Paula Hawkins yet, by a tense and haunting mile.
Nice.
So enough about us. Sean, can you bring Paula on, please?
Hello.
Hi,
everyone. Thank you for that very lovely introduction.
Thank you for coming.
Paula, we're so happy to have you on the Friends in Fiction show. By the way, y'all, Paula is in London, where it's almost, or probably is midnight by now.
Midnight now.
It is.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
basically, it's tomorrow now.
It's
Oh
tomorrow.
gosh, you're in the future.
Future, yeah.
Well, so this new book, The Blue Hour, is an addictive thriller which takes place on the remote island of Eris with only one house, one inhabitant, and one way off the island. It's unreachable from the Scottish mainland for 12 hours each day. Once home to Vanessa, a famous artist whose notoriously unfaithful husband vanished 20 years ago. Now home to Grace, a solitary creature of the tides, content in her own isolation. But when a shocking discovery is made in an art gallery in London, a visitor comes calling. Now, it seems to me this book is not such a cat and mouse thriller as a spider and fly suspense novel. So that's a bit about what the book is about. But one question we always love to ask of our guests, Paula, what do you think the book is really about?
Well, I mean, that's such a tricky question, as you all know, to sum up a book in a couple of lines. But for me, what's at the heart of it is obsession and friendship and longing. And there's a lot in it about perception, as you might expect. It's a book about an artist. It's about how we see things, how we misperceive things, how our situation, our environment might shape us so that we maybe start to misjudge things, or so our views of other people are changed by our environment. It's all about those kind of things.
Fascinating, sir. And I think it's hard to answer. And I also think sometimes we just don't know.
Yeah.
And so it's over, right? And we start getting out in the world talking about it and see what it means to other people. Well, we love hearing about that. But one of our favorite things to talk about, or mine at least, is where ideas come from. Can you tell us where you think the original ping, the original seed or idea for this book came from? Do you even know?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few separate elements, but for me, the first part of the story came actually with the location this time. It was this island. So I went on holiday to France, actually, to Brittany in 2017, ages ago. And I was walking, I like to walk when I'm on holiday. I was walking on that coast, and there are lots of little islands off the coast of Brittany. And I remember walking out on the sands at low tide and seeing a little tidal island like this, so an island that gets cut off when the tide comes in, and it had a single house on it, just one little island with one little house. And I had that thing where all the hair on the back of your neck kind of prickles, and I just thought that's a location because it's beautiful, it's remote, it's got these locked room possibilities because you could get trapped there, or you could want to get there and not be able to. But more than anything, it was this house that kind of intrigued me. That was like, who would want to go and live in a house like that? What kind of person decides, yep, I want to live in a house on an island that twice a day is inaccessible?
Yeah.
And so but this is what happens to me. I think about it for a bit, and then I park it and I'm writing something else, and then I might think about it a bit more. And so it took me a really long time to actually get to find the character that was going to live in the house. And that was Vanessa, my artist, who, again, that was someone I was thinking about for a long time. I wanted to write about a woman who creates visual art. But I wasn't sure how I was going to tell her story. So the island first, and then the character, really.
And sometimes we get a ping for a story that we pick up 20 years later, 10 years later.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
True. So we're really interested, and you started to touch on it in your writing process for The Blue Hour. Here is a quote from your book. The man on the radio is talking about mesmeric horror. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. About recurring patterns and motifs that remind the viewer that some griefs are inescapable and some destinies inevitable. So without any spoilers, with inescapable griefs and destinies inevitable, did you know your character's destinies from the beginning of the book when you first started?
I didn't know everything. I didn't know how everything would play out. I usually have a point that I'm aiming for, which is usually kind of whodunit. I kind of have to know, like, what the solution to the main mystery of the novel will be. But that's not always even the kind of the most important thing, which sounds like a weird thing to say. You know, as a crime writer, you set up a mystery and you have to solve that mystery, but there's often a lot of other stuff going on that for me might be more important. So anyway, I know the point that I'm aiming for, but then everything else, almost everything else, works itself out while I'm actually writing it, because for me that's the fun bit. That's the bit where the best writing comes, where I feel like I'm making connections between characters and ideas and all sorts of things. Those happen while I'm in the writing. I can't plan that kind of thing. So I didn't know how everything was going to play out.
Oh, I love knowing that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Paula, you mentioned Vanessa, one of your main characters, who's a renowned artist, and there's a good bit about her work and her methods in the novel. It reads so authentically. I mean, it's so easy to believe her as an artist. Can you talk a little bit about how you educated yourself about the life of a working artist?
So I read a lot, basically. I read some memoirs, biographies. I read a biography of Barbara Hepworth, the British sculptor, that was out a couple of years ago. There's a really wonderful memoir by a British painter called Celia Paul, and she writes a lot about her process and about painting the sea, because she so a lot of I was inspired by her writing about her work. There was an artist who's dead now, a Scottish painter called Joan Erdley, whose work I really love, and I read a lot about her, and I borrowed like some small aspects of her life and also of her process, of the things that she liked to do when she was painting and the kind of subject she chose. And I did do some research. I went to, because my artist is a painter, but she also makes ceramics and sculpture. So I went to some potter studios and watched them making things, just to get sort of the feel of it and the rhythm of it and the smell of it, and
Awesome.
it was wonderful. And although the thing I do remember that really struck me about potter studios were how many like implements there are in a potter studio that you could really do someone harm with.
Yes.
There's lots of like
so
evil little
true.
knives and
Little
wires
tiny
and
knives. I was just going to say that everywhere. Yeah.
But so yeah, that kind of stuff, and it was all really. I'm not generally a great researcher, but I really did enjoy sort of immersing myself in the lives of artists and
That's
their process.
really cool.
Yeah.
You know, the neat thing I think about reading about someone talking about their art is that you get not just sort of the technical stuff, but you get like how the art makes them feel, which I don't know, there's just something special about reading that from the perspective of an artist. So in the novel, you layer in this moody, brooding atmosphere also. And you talked a little bit about process a minute ago with Patti, but I'm wondering about how you went about capturing this particular mood and slowly ratcheting up the tension. Is that something that comes naturally to you, or are you layering that in sort of with a palette knife?
I mean, I think probably a bit of both. I think it does come. I think once you're really immersed in your novel, that kind of stuff you start to feel it, don't you? You start to feel what kind of atmosphere you're wanting to create. And I think it partly comes from reading as well. You read things that are similar. I was reading some du Maurier short stories and that kind of thing to kind of create that sort of unsettling feeling, that feeling that something is off and something is not right here, and I know I should be afraid of something, but I'm not exactly sure what it is yet. That kind of like low level dread, you know, and angst, and how that would make you feel, and how that once that sort of gets into your head, then everything starts to become a little suspicious to you or a little bit scary to you. It's that kind of thing. And so I guess I did probably layer it in a bit, but again, it's not planned. It sort of builds organically. That's how it feels now anyway. God, I mean, it's quite difficult to go back. But it certainly did feel like something that was building slowly while I was in the writing.
So interesting. Well, we've mentioned here already that the Blue Hour is basically a locked room mystery, but in this case, the room is this isolated Scottish island. So you've told us a little bit about what inspired this island, but I'm interested, once you knew, okay, I'm going to write about, an island sort of like this place, did you have to do any sort of research about what life on a deserted island would be like, or and were there any real places besides the one that you already mentioned that inspired this island?
Well, the landscape is very much inspired by the coast of Scotland. So yes, the island I discovered in France, but I didn't want it to be in France. I wanted it to be colder, darker, more Scottish, stormy seas and that kind of thing. And so I do have a home in Edinburgh, but I spend quite a lot of time on the West Coast, which is very beautiful. And there are lots of gorgeous islands. People know Skye and the Hebrides, Lewis and Harris. And there are lots of incredibly beautiful places. So I was able to draw on all of that. There is, as I said, it's not actually based on a particular place. So a lot of it is just pure imagination. It's imagining what it would actually be like to be on this place, how you would have to structure your life, and you would have to be a pretty practical person. I've talked a lot about the fact that I often long for this kind of solitude. I long for a place where could be cut off and where people kind of can't get to me, and I'd just be left to think and write. But it is fantasy because I'm not that practical, and I would go crazy, and it would be so infuriating to be stuck there and just suddenly realize that you've forgotten to buy the milk, and now you've got to wait.
And now you have a 12-hour time.
Right.
So I know that I'm actually not the kind of person that could live like that, but I could sort of indulge the fantasy, and it was almost like exploring that through the writing, exploring what it would be like. And but that was really interesting because it took me into like, what would it do to your brain after a while to be, and to your relationships with other people, to not have society around you, to not have people to bounce things off. I think that's quite an interesting situation. It's desirable in some ways, but in other ways it's very limiting, and you can get sort of locked in your own thought processes if you don't have people to bounce things off.
Yeah, that's true.
Sure. Interesting.
Yeah, Becker, who is the curator of the Vanessa Chapman estate, our artist, you talked a little bit about the theme of obsession. So Becker is obsessed with the artist and her work, and in turn, Grace, who has been Vanessa's friend, caregiver, question mark for what else. She inherits Eris, but not Vanessa's artwork. So she's obsessed with Vanessa. And I know that advanced readers have commented on how reminiscent this novel is to Daphne du Maurier's work. And I'm a du Maurier fan myself. And so I was thinking about du Maurier's own obsession with Cornwall, which of course was the setting for her best known book, Rebecca. And there's even I love the Easter egg reference to du Maurier and the 50th anniversary of the film of Don't Look Now. One thing I'm wondering about is this obsession. Do you think with this book that you veered a little into horror?
There are definitely touches of horror in there. I didn't lean into it completely, but I was. Again, it was almost more about trying to create that atmosphere, that frightening atmosphere. I think it does go some way towards that. There are there isn't a supernatural element, but there are moments where people think they're seeing things or wonder whether they're seeing things, and so it sort of starts to stray towards almost something that something to feel like a ghost story. And there is this presence obviously hanging over the book, like the presence of Rebecca. There is this ghostly presence of Vanessa, which is, hangs over the whole novel.
Yeah, I was thinking about Manderley, of course, the estate in Rebecca. And I visited that part of Cornwall years and years and years ago, and read about how de Moyer, during the war years when her husband was in the war, rented the house, that Manderley was based on. And then later on, the people who owned the property wouldn't rent it to her anymore. But so she basically broke in.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
That sounds like her.
Anyway.
That's commitment to your art.
Yes. Commitment to your work. Totally.
So is Don't Look Now your favorite, de Moyer, or do you have certainly not Birds, right? Tell me it's not Birds.
I mean, I do love that story. And it's it is really frightening when you read the short story. It's a lot more frightening. And I think it says this in the book, actually. It's more frightening. It's a lot more frightening than the movie. Obviously, the movie, I guess the effects and what have you are dated now, so it's not as terrifying as it might be. But yeah, Don't Look Now. It's a beautiful story as well. There's something, and it's you forget how kind of like funny it is in the beginning and how quirky and sort of tender. So it is a beautiful story, but that very much has that strange, unsettling atmosphere. That atmosphere of being distracted by one thing and not really seeing where the real threat is coming from. So that was definitely in my head when I was writing this. Yes, de Moyer was kind of there in the background all the time.
What is the de Moyer book? I read it when I was in Southern England a couple of years ago, where she had a place down there where she could travel. The character could travel to the past. Do you remember that one? Okay, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to put it on the page. But we're back to you now. Prior to becoming a novelist, you were educated and trained as a journalist, and you worked also as a financial journalist. So I don't make the leap from financial journalist to crime novelist. So how has that experience played into your work as a novelist?
Well, I mean, I think the financial part of it was just kind of one of those things that happens. That wasn't what I intended. It was just the first job I got in journalism happened to be on the business pages. And then you end up getting sort of steered down a certain path. And I worked as a journalist for about 15 years in the end, and I enjoyed a lot of it, but it didn't make my heart race. And all the time I was doing this, I was constantly sort of starting novels, on the side that I never showed to anyone.
Oh, and really? While you were doing that? Okay.
I was convinced they were terrible. And so for me, at that point, writing fiction was just kind of a thing I did for myself. And I really didn't have any hopes of it ever going anywhere. I didn't think I was going to be a novelist. But when I was a journalist, I had a column in one of the papers, and an agent, the woman who is my agent now, in fact, contacted me, and she said, "Oh, I've been reading some of your stuff. I really like it." She had decided that she thought there was like a gap in the market for sort of a self-help book about finance aimed specifically at young women. And she said, "I think you'd be like really good. I think your style would suit this." And she asked me if I'd be interested, and I was like, "Great, yeah, that sounds like fun." And so I signed on with this agent, and I did that book. And she said, we talked about fiction. I admitted that I had like harbored that I wrote these stories that I didn't show to her. And she was really encouraging, but I still didn't do anything. I still didn't actually go anywhere with it. I was I had no confidence at all. And then some years later, through my agent, a publisher approached me, and they had sort of a kind of a ghostwriting commission to write a rom-com set against the backdrop of like the global financial crisis. They wanted someone to write a story about a young woman who works in the city, who loses her job and falls on hard times and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they came to me because they thought like I understood finance, so I could, understand the backdrop to all this. And they asked me if I would do this. And it was a really odd kind of way into writing fiction because the idea wasn't mine. The character wasn't mine. The story arc wasn't mine. Anyway, I did do it.
You did it. Okay.
I wrote this like rom-com, which I think I wrote in about 8 weeks. That they gave me no time at all.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And I did it. It was published under a pseudonym, and it did kind of okay. And then they came back to me and asked, "Oh, could you do another one of these?" And I ended up writing these four like rom-coms, and I do really like do that because I'm not sure that they were very funny at all. I did 4 of those under the pseudonym. It was a terrible match, really, in terms. I enjoyed doing them; they were fun to do, and it was really brilliant as a way of flexing my fiction muscles and sort of figuring out how to create story and character arcs, and also just getting through writing a novel, which, as you all know, is like half the battle, is getting to the end of the novel. So all that was incredibly useful. But as I was writing them, I kept sort of introducing more and more jeopardy and tragedy, and more and more terrible things kept happening to all the characters. It was clear that this was not a good match in genre terms. And the 4th one of those did really badly. And I think at that point, we sort of realized this was not working. So this is an incredibly long answer to your question.
This is fascinating.
So at that point, I was a bit despairing. I'd taken 2 years to write the last book, and it bombed. And I was despairing, but said agent was still very encouraging, and she knew that we'd been talking about the fact that I felt that crime would be much more my kind of cup of tea, that it was the genre that I liked to read more, or So she said, she'd been saying, "Come on, show me your ideas, blah, blah, blah." And we talked about some of my ideas. And one of them, she said, "That drunk girl you wrote about, you've got to go back to the drunk girl." So the drunk girl ended up being Rachel. I've got on the train. But I had this idea for a character, this woman who drinks too much, who can't remember what she did last night. And I'd been trying to craft a story around her, but I hadn't sort of succeeded. Anyway, I went back to her, and I had this, and I'd been thinking about this Rear Window-ish idea that she would like see be a witness to an act of violence or something. Anyway, that then developed. I decided, no, not an act of violence. It didn't need to be an act of violence because of who she was, because she was so unreliable. It could actually be anything, because she was kind of a fantasist. Anything she witnessed could kind of kick off the mystery. And so there you go. I put Rachel, drunk girl, on the train, and off we went. And so that was the crossover. Eventually, it came from this dark and depressed place that I was in at the time, and a somewhat desperate feeling. And I poured all that darkness and desperation into the character.
Oh my God, that is so...
It's a long and winding road.
No, it is fascinating because we talk about it being your debut novel, and it is so good in
debut thriller.
To know,
debut thriller, not debut novel by any chance. So there's I think in some quarters, this idea that I had like an overnight success, and very, very far from it. It was a long.
That's why it's good to know.
It was but I mean, I was so lucky. I was lucky to have found this agent. I was lucky to have been given that opportunity to write those other novels, where I could kind of like test the waters before putting my heart on the page.
Doing the thing you wanted.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I just remembered the name. The House on the Strand.
Oh, yes.
Maria. Yeah. Where she goes back and visits the past. Yeah.
So, Paula, as I was listening to you talk about that, it felt like I was listening to myself talk about the beginning of my career, because I wrote 4 romantic comedies that I was never very good at until I finally had the courage to take the leap into historical fiction. And that's where I found my home. And I think there's something so powerful about letting go of what you think you're supposed to be writing and moving into what your heart is telling you to write. Like, I think it's just like, you just know you found it. You know, you found the thing you're supposed to be doing. Can you talk a little bit about that whirlwind experience of going from these 4 novels that maybe weren't quite a fit to suddenly having this huge, enormous, instant #1 bestseller that took the world by storm with The Girl on the Train?
Well, I think the first thing is that I did feel that difference the moment I sort of got Rachel's voice, you know, when you're like working your way into something and then you're suddenly like, oh yeah, oh, this is it. This is what I should have been doing all along. And it felt like everything, you know, it clicked into place. I knew it was so much better than what I'd been doing before. And well, it felt so much better. So I was still very lacking in confidence, but when I showed the work to my agent, she was thrilled and she was very excited, and then we sold it to publishers who were also very excited about it. Awesome. So there was this anticipation in the build-up, but you know, that happens all the time, as I'm sure you know, people get excited about books and it doesn't necessarily actually mean anything. So
yeah,
I was unprepared I was completely unprepared for how big it got and how, I mean, it was extraordinary. Then again, when I look back on it, it doesn't happen in one big moment. It's lots of small moments and another small moment and another small moment. And at the time, you're just kind of, I was touring all the time and, you know, doing interviews. So you don't really have that much of a chance to like sit back and appreciate it. You're just sort of running from one thing to the next. It was great. It was wonderful. It was somewhat overwhelming. Again, I don't know what, I think a lot of writers have this thing that there's that like slightly almost violent disconnect from sitting quietly at your desk, tapping away to being in the world, and being the center of attention was certainly not something that I'd really experienced before, not in that way. It was felt deeply uncomfortable at first. Still not like super comfortable with it, but it's, you know, so it was like 95% good experience with 5% terror and overwhelm. But no, it was all great. And then, you know, the thing was that there was all the touring for the hardback and then the movie and then the paperback. And so it felt like 2 years, I think, pretty much of touring, which again was fantastic, but it made writing pretty tricky because I'm not one of those people who can just like write 400 words in the departure lounge and then, you know, I don't work like that. I sit quietly at my desk and I have to like go in for a while, you know, and really be immersed. And you know what it's like when you're trying to get into the heads of your characters and then you have to kind of pull yourself out of those characters and go and talk about the ones from the last book. It's actually quite a difficult thing to make that adjustment. So it was very tricky to write after The Girl on the Train in the immediate aftermath. I mean, not now. Now it's, you know, it's nearly 10 years now.
Speaking of that, I'm wondering if having that huge explosive success, like having that huge, I mean, just it was everywhere. When you sat down to write the next book, was having had that level of success freeing for you, or was it almost paralyzing because you worried about living up to this standard that you had set?
It certainly wasn't freeing. I had already started working on the next novel by the time the Girl on the Train came out, because, you know, there was quite a big gap between finishing that book and it being published. So I had started. I had some characters in my head, you know. So I wasn't coming to it completely cold. But it, you know, you write that first, it did feel like my first novel, The Girl on the Train. You write that without any idea whether anyone is ever going to read it.
Yeah.
So there's that, and it's kind of slightly depressing, but also slightly freeing because
yes.
For the second one, I knew people were going to read it. I knew people were going to be watching what I did next, and that was very daunting. It was very daunting. And I decided to try and be really ambitious. It had 11 different points of view or something insane, that second novel. There were aspects of it which I still maintain which I thought were really good, but I think it was kind of rushed, and it wasn't written under the most ideal circumstances for me. So it was tricky. It was tricky, that one.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine like just trying to be in the headspace of millions of people have thought that, this book is the best thing they've ever read, and then having to follow that up. It's very, very stifling, I would think. Like, I mean, I hope it happens to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can't complain.
There are worse problems to have.
I will relish that if it comes my way. But
yeah.
No, but so one of the really interesting things about The Girl on the Train was that along with Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl, the two of you were sort of credited with igniting readers' love for the unreliable narrator. And there have been lots of think pieces on this in major media outlets and plenty of copycats and even some spoofs since you published your debut in 2015. When you wrote it, did you have any inkling that you would be credited with starting or reigniting a trend?
Not at all. And I know I have a kind of sort of weird relationship with this unreliable narrator thing. The hill I will die on is that everyone is an unreliable narrator. Nobody tells the truth all the time, even if they want to.
Yeah.
We don't remember things perfectly. So even if you are trying to remember things, if you're trying to tell the truth, everything is obviously subjective. So anyway, I do believe that everyone's slightly unreliable, but Rachel was unreliable in a very specific way because it was alcohol induced, and so it's never a question. It's not like it's Amy from Gone Girl. I love that character who is deliberately misleading. Rachel doesn't know, so she's unreliable to herself. That was the kind of thing that that intrigued me about that character, was that she doesn't know herself. She can't, and her sense of guilt and responsibility is completely skewed all the time because she's having to try and fill in gaps about what she did and what she really intended and all those kind of things. So that was what I found fascinating, more than her. She's not lying. Well, I mean, I guess she does lie, but I can't remember the precise. She misleads at certain points, but really, it's the fact that she can't know herself because of her blackouts.
Yeah. So, speaking of this kind of unreliable / maybe unlikable narrator, do you ever feel any pressure to create characters that are likable? This is something that kind of comes up for us sometimes.
Yeah,
especially women. I mean, honestly, especially women who are likable. I don't feel like it happens as much with male characters.
I do think it's a bit odd to come to a crime novel for likable characters. I mean,
for sure.
No, I'm just not really that interested in likability. You have to write someone a character who the reader is going to want to follow around and to be compelled by.
Right.
But also, I mean, the other point is people talk about my characters being unlikable all the time, and I almost feel slightly sort of put out. I'm like, I like them.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't intend them to be incredibly unlikable.
Yeah.
I guess because I understand them so well, and I do try. And obviously, I often portray people behaving badly or unreasonably. But there's generally when you delve into their psyche and their psychology and their background, then you're like, oh yeah, I get why they're like that. So that it is explained, and that's the stuff that I'm interested in. It's like, how did she get like this? What happened? Why is she behaving in this way? That's the stuff that I find interesting. And so I just don't know how I would write a crime novel if everyone was really nice. But I guess that's maybe why you have like a detective or what have you, because so they can be the hero of your story. Yeah. I don't tend to write stories with heroes or heroines anyway.
Interesting.
All right. So we're live right now. So we have all these live questions rolling in, and I know we have to wrap this up because it's almost 1 a.m. for you. So we will wrap this up. But Jill Briggs Anderson sent in a really question I want you to answer, because we kind of chatted about this in the green room. So do you ever wake up during the night after a dream that might work as the start of a novel?
You know, I don't think I ever have. I've definitely heard other writers talk about like they woke up and they wrote something. I'm afraid I don't think my dreams are that interesting. I really don't. I think the starts of my novels tend to come from like things I've read in the news or a story that somebody's told me.
Okay.
And unfortunately, clearly my dream life is not that thrilling. Sorry.
It's never happened to me either. So it's never happened to me.
It happened to me one time.
That's right.
Just
I
once.
keep having these like really like I keep dreaming these like really great stories that are completely off brand for me. Like I can't write them as a novel, but they're like fascinating.
Ooh, interesting.
Okay. Gosh, we've asked you so many things. Ladies, do you think we have time for one more live?
Oh, ask her Terry Lauer's question. I like that one.
You ask it.
What was the name of the financial book that you wrote?
Oh God. So I should say, please don't go and buy this book. Firstly, it wouldn't make any sense to Americans because it is very much about like British financial products and things.
Sure. Okay.
It was called The Money Goddess.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. I think it was a blatant, a complete rip-off of Nigella Lawson's Domestic Goddess, I believe.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
That
but
is awesome.
the advice is very out of date now. I would definitely not go and read that.
Steer clear.
Sorry.
That's so funny.
I'm guessing you probably don't want to also tell the names of the rom-coms you wrote.
Oh, I can do, but my pseudonym was Amy Silver.
Okay.
And I believe, I don't know if they wouldn't be available in the US actually, but there was one called All I Want for Christmas. There was one called 1 Minute to Midnight. And I think you could probably get them on Amazon. Well, you might be able to get them on Amazon. I don't know.
Sure you could, at least digitally anyway.
Yeah. Probably.
All right. Well, Paula, if you'll stick around, stay with us for a little bit longer before you have to toddle off to bed. We're going to have another question for you, but we have a few quick reminders for the viewers out there.
Okay, I'm going to do this so quick, Paula. For all of you watching and listening, we encourage you, and why wouldn't you, after this conversation, to rush out and buy your copies of The Blue Hour. The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll be getting it at a discount and helping to fund our show while supporting Paula and our beloved independent booksellers nationwide.
We also want to remind you quickly to follow us on Instagram and to join our Facebook group, which is now officially more than 250,000 members strong. So when you visit friendsandfiction.com, you can stay up to date about everything we have going on, and you can sign up for the Friends and Fiction Endless Stories Substack, which is chock full of bonus content, like a little behind-the-scenes interview we did with Paula tonight. And don't forget that if you upgrade to the paid version of our Substack, you will get invitations to join us at free bonus events, like the Ask Us Anything Zoom we did tonight just before the show.
And we have just one more question for you, Paula. Your publisher says The Blue Hour recalls the sophisticated suspense of Shirley Jackson and Patricia Highsmith and cements your place among the very best of our most nuanced and stylish storytellers. How does it feel being compared to those writers?
Well, I mean, it's very flattering. I am a big admirer of both of those writers, and those. I mean, again, they were in my head when I was writing this novel. The Shirley Jackson atmosphere, trying to.
Yeah.
She's a woman who can make. This is somebody else's quote. Who could make a picnic in a garden feel creepy and terrifying. Yeah. So there is something. And her sentences are just beautiful. If you're interested in writing, you just go and read the opening sentences of any Shirley Jackson story, and you're sort of blown away by them. And the Highsmith voice was kind of. I bought her diaries just before I think I started writing this. They published that big book of her diaries, and I mean her voice is quite something. But it was an interesting one to read when I was thinking about some of these characters and their relationships. So. I mean, yes, it's hugely flattering. It is hugely flattering, excessively flattering, I think.
I love that.
Are there other authors who have influenced your writing?
Oh yeah, I mean, loads and loads. I have favorites that I return to a lot. People like I don't know if you Kate Atkinson, who writes
she's great.
literary fiction and crime fiction, and who's sort of occupies a kind of dream space, if you ask me, of that like you know, really literary novels, which are also complete page turners. That's the kind of thing that I adore. Pat Barker, who's another novelist, she doesn't write crime, but she writes a lot of historical fiction, which is also extremely intelligent but pacey. You know, there are lots of American crime writers who I think are fantastic. Gillian Flynn, we've already talked about. Megan Abbott writes really, really interesting political, like small p political novels, you know, novels that are about things that are threatening to women now. I think she's fantastic. Laura Lippman is fantastic. You know, there are so many people. I could bang on about other writers all night.
Well, Paula, we have 250,000 members of this Facebook group that love to come see an author on tour. So can you let us know where we can find you on tour, or if you can't remember because it's 1 a.m. where you are, where we can find you online?
I do have a website, which is paulahawkinsbooks.com. And that has the tour dates on the events bit. I know I'm going to be in Traverse City, Michigan, I want to say, on Monday.
That's a real place. That's a real place.
And Edina, Minnesota, I think on Tuesday. As you say, I actually don't have the full schedule in my head, but it is paulahawkinsbooks.com. So I'll be there next week. And I would love to see people if you want to come out and chat books.
Paula, thanks so much for talking about the Blue Hour tonight. It's been so much fun, and so it's perfect for Halloween. Thanks for being with us on the Friends in Fiction show. And now we're going to send you off to Toddletown.
Thank you so much.
Night,
Lovely to meet you all.
Safe travels over here, Paula.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, be sure to tune in next week when Kristin and Patti will welcome Louise Penny to discuss her new novel, The Gray Wolf. That show will air live on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, October 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it'll be published to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, November 1st. And that's a wrap.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Good night. Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.